Good afternoon and welcome to the November 21st meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. I'm Luke Schmidt, president of our club and president of Bellevue Schmidt & Associates. To lead us in our invitation today is Dr. Bob Hilgers, president and CEO of the Women's Global, and the 8 nominees for director of the Rotary Club of Louisville board for 2020 through 2022. And I'd like to thank the members of the nominating committee: Julie Sheridan, Barry Barker, Tony Coffey, Mary Michael Corbett, Tony Kemper, Maria Smith, and Kevin Lordell. So, let's begin with our 2 nominees for club president for the 2021-2022 Rotary year. As I introduce your name, if you would please stand in front of the stage. So when I call your name, first is John Jennings. Jesus West Casavio. We're going to tag team this, so let me tell you a little bit about John. John is the account executive for the Underwriters Group. John has been a member of our club since 2011. During that time, he has been secretary of the Rotary Club and the Rotary Fund, director of our club, chair of the Business Synergy Committee, and vice chair of the Speakers Committee.
Jean West Lasavio is the owner, producer of Base West Productions. Jean has been a member of our club since 2014. During that time, she served as the Invocation Committee co-chair, Communications Committee member, Speakers Committee co-chair, and currently serves as a board of director and is a Paul Harris Fellow.
Okay, now we're going to introduce our 8 candidates for the 4 director positions. 4 of these candidates will be elected to serve 2-year terms from July 1 of 2020 through June 30, 2022. Please stand in front of the stage as we introduce each of you, and we shall introduce candidates 4 at a time. We do have a few that had prior commitments and unable to be with us in person today. Their photo and information is featured on the screen. Each of them is very involved in the community, and for the sake of time, we'll only highlight a bit about their road to service. Okay, let me introduce these first 4. Cynthia Miles Brown, and then again, please come forward. Steve Carrick, Cheryl Kersey, and Jay Nally. Cynthia is the owner of Ciderama Dixie. She has been a member of our club since 2016 and is currently the Invocation Committee chair. She has been a member of the Business Synergy Committee and has participated in the Salvation Army Bell Ring.
Steve is the Director of Consulting Services for MCM CPAs and Advisors LLP. He has been a member of our club since 2017, and Steve has been an active member of the Speakers Committee.
Cheryl is the president of Kersey and Kersey Architects. She has been a member of our club since 2015. Cheryl has been the chair of the Youth and Education Committee, co-chair of the Unsung Heroes program, and a member of the Awards and Recognition Committee. She completed the Rotary Leadership Institute, received the Rotarian of the Year Award for 2016-17, is a Paul Harris Fellow, and has participated in various service projects and was a participant in the 1993 group study exchange in southern India for District 3200.
Jay Mallory is the Kentucky Market President of Image Quest. Jay has been a member of our club since 2016. He's been a member of the Membership Development Committee and currently serves as the chair of the Business Synergy Committee.
Let's please give a round of applause to these 4 candidates.
If you all would come forward as I call your name: Mike Richardson, Ken Selvaggi, Brian Bieneman, and Todd Warren. Mike is the principal for Glenview Trust. He has been a member of our club since 2016. He was the Rotary Foundation District 6710 Treasurer, graduate of the Rotary Leadership Institute, a mentor for the Rotary Promise Scholars Program, a member of the Membership Development Committee, Business Synergy Committee, and the Membership Engagement Committee. Mike has been a new member mentor, leadership fellow, mentor, and is a Paul Harris Fellow.
Ken is the general manager for Wave TV. He's been a Rotarian since 2003 and a member of our club since 2011. He has participated in many of the Lifeline Committee activities and is also a Paul Harris Scholar.
Brian is an attorney with Wyatt Tarrant Combs. He has been a member of our club since 2015. Brian has been the Leadership Fellows Committee Vice Chair, the Rotary Rotaract Committee Chair and Vice Chair, a member of the Business Synergy Committee, and a member of the Governance Advisory Committee.
Todd is the owner of MPI Printing. He has been a member of our club since 2003. During that time, he has been a Rotary Promise Scholar mentor, supported the DePaul Party fundraiser, and is also a Paul Harris Scholar. Rotarians, please listen closely to the election guidelines as written in our policies and procedures manual. The election will be conducted online via SurveyMonkey with ballots and survey link emailed to members immediately following today's meeting. Members get to cast 1 vote for a president nominee and 4 votes for board of directors nominees. Voting is open until 12 p.m. on Wednesday, December 4th. The election results will be announced at the club's annual meeting that coincides with the holiday party, the evening of Wednesday, December 4th at the Boat Club. So let's give one more round of applause for our outstanding election candidates. Julie, thank you again for doing such a good job on chairing this stuff. I think we've got great folks here.
They're all outstanding.
All outstanding.
Thank you.
Okay, now to the main event, and I'm very happy to ask Tyler Allen to come to the stage to introduce our guest speaker. Tyler is the owner of USA Image Technologies and a Paul Harris Scholar.
Well, hello everyone. I am very, very excited to make this introduction today. Somebody you almost all already know. But let me tell you a little background on why I'm so excited, because I've been waiting about 15 years to have this presentation happen at the Rotary Club. Some 15 years ago, I stood on top of the Tannery building in New Albany with the then owner, Al Goodman. Looked out over the Loop Island wetlands, across the falls of the Ohio, and into downtown Louisville. And he was working on trying to figure out how to secure that landscape in that area. And so I said, oh, you've got to talk to Dan Jones, you've got to do this, that, and the other. Fast forward many years, and I got a call probably a year and a half ago from a group of folks who were working on basically securing and preserving about 500 acres of land on the north shore of the Ohio River and the falls of the Ohio. Scott will share with you how precious and how historic and everything that landscape is. And so, some 15 years later, I'm excited to introduce Scott here to tell you about the River Heritage Conservancy. You all know Scott. He's been here to speak before because he was the executive director of the Park at Floyd's Fork, previously the largest example of this type of work in this community. And you've heard him talk about that. I'm here to fill you on a little bit that you may not remember about Scott. Before that, before moving here, he had also worked on projects in Virginia and Idaho, the same type of scale work on preserving the American landscape and conserving it for future generations. He is a graduate of, he has an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree from Boise State University. That you may remember is the one with the goofy blue turf football fields. He is presently the chair of the North American chair of the World Urban Parks Congress, where basically last year he went to Australia to present on some of the work that's happening here. A few weeks ago, I heard him present not about the Parks Project, but talking about cities as national parks. And literally that changed my perspective. I sit in my backyard now and I look at the wildlife and the animals with a totally new vision, a vision that has been shared with me by Scott. He has a big vision for what can happen, and he has an infectious way of sharing that vision with everybody else. He and his wife Jennifer live in Louisville with their 2 Dalmatians, and so I give you today Scott Martin.
George Costanza and just leave on the high point now. Walk out. It's a pleasure to be with you all again today. I have 8 billion slides. My ambition is too high to get through them in the time allotted. So if it's okay with y'all, I'm going to just rip and roll and do the best we can and not let my inner ADD come out too much on you here. Make sure this works. Okay, here's the big thinking. We're going to come back to this. Everyone knows what that is because we all do a lot of time in the International Space Station, but that is our community of Louisville. And I'm going to say Louisville now because no one cares if it's Southern Indiana or Louisville once you get 50 miles away from home, so I think we're all adults in this room, and we're going to talk about this as Louisville. Okay, so the thing I want to draw your attention to is that black spot right there in the center. I'm going to come back to it, but we are the only city in the nation that I'm aware of who has its wildest area literally in its downtown core. If you look out that window right now, you can see it. That's extraordinary, and that's the story I'm going to leave you with today. But before I get there, I want to talk about why we even have the audaciousness to think of something this big, and it's really timely. We lost some giants in this community with the Shines, the Joneses. I think we take a minute and thank them because they gave us courage to carry this dialogue forward. And I think if they were thinking and talking to us right now and not telling us stop talking about them, which is the first thing they would all say, would be keep going. And so I hope that this is a message I'm going to share with you that, hey, the stage is ours now. Look to your left, look to your right. We are the Sam Shines and we are the Jones family now. And if we're going to do it, we're going to do it in this room. And I kind of think it's worth doing. So let's keep going, and away we go. I think that's the best way we can honor their legacy. So let me please introduce you to the nation's next iconic urban landscape and park, if I may. A couple of setups. We're in the midst of the greatest migration in human history with the move to cities. You all know that. Number two, livable urban cities require quality green spaces. You know that. Finally, or thirdly, our dense North Shore communities lack this sort of iconic green space. This is the last gap in our region to add this sort of landscape. Our design expectations in this community are extraordinarily high and scary if you sit in my shoes. When Olmsted sets the bar, damn, okay? But we gotta do it. Our park design is nearing completion. I'm gonna give you a sneak peek. Our land acquisition is ongoing, and you are really the first big group to hear. We're gonna unveil this project in park in 2020. So you guys are ahead of the curve on what we're working on here. This is the era of innovative public partnerships. We are a conservancy, just like the conservancies you see up there on the board. The one we're most modeled after is the Presidio in San Francisco. This is a combination of public lands that are federally managed and private lands and state lands, and that's our model in many respects. We believe in the conservancy model here because it's been proven thanks to the Olmsted Conservancy that set the bar, the continuing work by Waterfront Development Corporation, and of course the work that's done through the Floyd's Fork, which Luke Schmidt has been such a great supporter of, and many people in this room. This is the DNA of our board. You'll recognize some of the names here. If you're interested in joining this board and being one of the founders of this project, please come see me. We are in a growth position. As I talk about cities, this is the big takeaway. By 2050, 7 out of 10 of us are going to live in cities. So I want you to think of Louisville as not 1.3 million people. I want you to think of this as 2 million people at its absolute minimum. And the question is, how do we shape a community that's livable there? The next point, briefly, urban beauty ties with lower taxes is the most important predictor of overall population growth in cities. Pretty matters. Never let anyone tell you it doesn't. If I gave you a vacation or business relocation choice now, and apologies to the city I'm going to poke at, but they're easy. If I said Asheville, North Carolina, or Toledo, yeah, okay? So don't, apologies if you're from the fine city. But pretty matters. And the beauty about pretty is a choice. Pretty is a policy choice. We choose to be ugly or we choose to be pretty. And it matters. These stats up on the board, they don't come from some tree-hugging hippie like me. These come from the Federal Reserve, okay? So we know that stuff matters. Next, our peers are not sitting still. Real quick, hey, this is the state of the communities in which we live. Anyone know that downtown? Columbus, that's the new park on the river I can never pronounce. How about that one? Indy, White River. They tell me that's a river. I'm like, yeah, sure, that's a river. That's cute. How about this one? Nashville, the Cumberland River. This one's a little weirder. Greenville, South Carolina, I heard a few people say it. I would argue this is the only city in the nation that successfully transitioned from tobacco, textiles, and furniture as well as any other. The fun thing about this city, this park idea, you want to see a courageous man, A Jewish mayor, who was a survivor of the Holocaust, led, created, and envisioned this. A Jewish mayor in South Carolina in the 1970s. That's a profile in courage, and that's evidence that people make a difference in this work. This is my old stomping grounds on the blue turf. You're welcome one day, Tyler. You'll learn how to play football, a little Northwestern. I wish you luck. This is Boise, Idaho. That may look a little more familiar to you. Beltline in Atlanta. Golden Gate Park that just reopened last year. Dorothea Dix Park in Raleigh. The Gathering Place in Tulsa. You're looking at the single largest philanthropic gift in the history of the United States for public parks. The Kaiser family made a gift of $456 million to build an 80-acre park there that just opened. They thought it was the #1 thing they could do to tie their community together. That park is called the Gathering Place because it's where the wealthiest neighborhood in Tulsa and the poorest neighborhood in Tulsa meet. Small D democratic spaces will bring us together. And then one just down the road you may be familiar with. If you're not, you will be soon because I think it's tremendously exciting. This is Town Branch Commons project that's going through Lexington. Another great green space. So I say this to say Louisville we have a lot to be proud of, but we cannot rest on our laurels. Globally, it's also going on. Y'all may not recognize that, but that's Queen Elizabeth Park in London. Singapore Gardens. This is a park I can never pronounce, but it's in Moscow, and it was designed by George Hargraves, who did our waterfront park. So these are our peers, this is the state, and these cities that provide this green space, we argue are going to thrive. Next, the Ohio River is rapidly changing. If we had this discussion 30 years ago, we would have looked at the Ohio as a commodity, a barge-moving machine. Have y'all seen what's happened in the Ohio over the last 20 years? It's transitioning right in front of us. It's going through the same transition that the Rhone and Rhine went through in Europe, becoming a recreation and conservation corridor. Project that forward in 30 years, what does that mean? It suddenly means we live on beachfront property. I saw 4 tourist steamboats tied up at Waterfront Park twice this summer. Could your parents have imagined that on this river? So this whole river corridor is changing, and there are new voices that are saying they have a voice on this river besides commodities. Waterfronts are incredibly powerful. Y'all may recognize that, you may not. That's 1974 in Baltimore. Y'all know what the Inner Harbor is today. You know the economic impact that Inner Harbor does for the city of Baltimore. Remarkable life-saving move for that city that has real challenges. But this is something that is holding them up and keeping them going. You don't have to look that far away. Does that waterfront look a little familiar to you? 1968. Yep, that's us. There's the great work David Karam and his team did. I'm sure he's been here and Deborah and talked about what they do. $1.3 billion. I would argue and will argue to you that downtown's livability now has to do with a vibrant art scene. Thank you, Kristen. And it has to do with green space. And it's a unique downtown that's competitive globally, I believe, because what we offer here is authentic and no one can copy it. So we believe in the power of green space to change things. So I take you back to the satellite photo now in that dark space. That dark space means nothing's happening there. Next time you fly into Louisville, take a look at it when you do that great approach over the city. It's remarkable to have this wild space right downtown. It's also where a bunch of stuff feels like it wants to come together programmatically. That outer loop kind of recognized, it's kind of our representation of the Louisville Loop, the 100-mile project. The inner loop is kind of the Olmsted system. I left out Chickasaw, that's my fault, I'll fall short on that. And then the inner one is one that's really exciting me, and maybe it's just me, but I'm really excited about how dense we can make the city and how livable we can make the city. If you take that little 10-kilometer loop, connect both sides of the river and think about us as a dense, walkable community, this is what I think can propel us and allow us to compete with the Nationals and Columbuses. The red dot is the project site I'll be talking to you about, and that's right there. That's either Alaska or an octopus, depending upon your Rorschach test. The area we're working on is the head of the octopus, and that's about 600 acres. To give you some context of scale, that outer rectangle is Central Park in New York, that vertical one is Grant Park in Chicago, and then Waterfront Park is in between. The blue area is doubly fascinating. That's the Falls of the Ohio Conservation Area. It's the only wildlife conservation in the United States. The Ohio River is 981 miles in length. That 1.5-mile section is the only section set aside for recreation and conservation on the entire flippin' river. We sit on a national park. It had 23,000 visits last year. The average 7-Eleven has 200,000 visits a year. I mean, are you kidding? I mean, it's like we're not even trying at this point. But if you put a park in relationship with this, and I'm just going to throw this out there, what if that area was a national park unit? What if the National Park Service had it? How would we recontextualize what it means to live here? So we get really excited, if you can't tell from the tone of my voice and my inflection, about what can be done there. We want to bring to this location some guiding principles. Number one, we believe design matters. You all know that flag. I want to give you an example of why design matters and why we spend money on it and why we spend so much effort on it. Australia built 2 opera houses in the 1960s. Very few people know that. What we all know, of course, is the opera house they built in Perth. No! Not the slightest clue Perth had an opera. I bet none of y'all, even if you've been to Perth, you don't have an opera. No, we know this opera house. Well, the cost difference is like 15%. So design matters to do things well. Secondly, we know visitor experience matters. This is a new bridge over Silver Creek, and this is Ashton who's on our team. She's not that short, y'all, really. This is the Park Bridge. No, you don't, if you build bridges that look like this, with all deference to my dear engineers who do math in the room, sometimes shut up and just let architects do stuff. So we need to be thoughtful. So we spend a lot of time on design. And we believe that Olmsted was right, and Dan Jones taught me this, that the park makes the city. It is fundamentally a truth. So we had to pick people that do great design. So when we started working on this project, first thing is that we convened a jury of national experts to help us pick the architect. I am name dropping, I apologize. Susan Rodemaker, a bunch of y'all know in this room, because she was the founder of the Olmsted Conservancy here. Brilliant, thoughtful designer. She's also editor of Landscape Design magazine. Charles McKinney, you won't know. He did a little project, perhaps you've heard of it, called the High Line in New York. He was Mayor Bloomberg's director of design. And then Leon Younger, who's from up in Indianapolis, is on the U.S. Olympic Committee. They volunteered their time to donate to us and jury out and pick our architect. The architect they selected, the name won't mean anything, but it's named Olin. Olin was Steve Jobs' architect of record for Apple Computers and built the Apple campus. They also did the Anacostia Bridge project, the 11th Street project up in D.C., which is tremendously exciting and inspiring to us, and the new Washington Monument Grounds. They also did a little project called the Getty Museum, you may be familiar with. And they're really cut their teeth on Bryant Park. They're our architects. Now here's what's really fun. Of all of the parks we have here in our great city, not a single park has been designed by a woman. Cindy Sanders is the architect of this park. We're the first park designed by a woman. And that's a pretty cool deal, so I get kind of excited about that. The next thing we do is you get the best expert in town, and that's Jim Walters. And all y'all know Jim Walters' work if you don't know him. So we put Jim together with Olin and said, bring us a great park because of the experience these folks could do. So here's what they've done. Now I'll go fast. They got in the room, they got smart, I got the hell out of the way. First thing you do is you got to learn the site. So here's what we got on the site, y'all. We have silver maples. We have eastern cottonwoods. We have sedge meadows. And we have these species. Yell out the bird or I'm going to go quick and race right through it. Come on. There we go. Scarlet tanager.
Bluebird.
No.
Indigo.
Indigo bunting.
Oriole.
Baltimore Oriole. There we go. What's the eagle holding? I don't know what we do with our country. That's a carp.
Oh, hawk.
Kestrel.
Hesper.
Warbler. I always pronounce it wrong. Promontory, I think, is the correct pronunciation. Spotted salamander. Tree crawl. Paddlefish. Only found in the Ohio and Missouri, Mississippi rivers, y'all. Rainbow darter, I won't even ask. Bat, don't know the type, I'm not very smart. Coyote. Close. That's a mink. Otter. Lion squirrel. These all live in that dark space I showed you earlier. What also used to live there are bison. This is where the bison would cross the Ohio. This area has been inhabited for 12,000 years. I'll never work on a richer site than this. This area has been inhabited for 12,000 years. We think there are about 12,000 to 15,000 people that lived here pre-1491. This was New York City, y'all. Now what happened, here's a little, I'm taking up way too much time, but let me tell a story and share it with you. So yeah, we all know the story, Daniel Boone and John Floyd, they all come, and it was what? This was the battling ground, right? This is where it was kind of empty, and we kind of don't think about our First Nations that were here, the traditional landowners, our elders. Well, they were here, but what happened in 1492 when Columbus and Spaniards came in, what was the one thing they introduced that probably changed our continent more than anything else? Smallpox, precisely, influenza, diseases. Well, what happened is those diseases came up these vectors. And I'm glad we got healthcare experts here. This is a great study. These highways of transportation that made these places inhabitable for the First Nations was their demise. Smallpox wiped out this population about 100 years before the British colonists got here. So the area that they thought was empty wasn't empty, it had just been empty recently. And so it was being fought over. So what we're trying to do is find these stories of these First Nations, these traditional owners, and these elders, and honor them. Because our time on this land is squat. It doesn't amount to a hill of beans. This area was theirs for a lot longer. How do we learn from them, and how do we apply their lessons and elevate their stories, we think is fundamentally important. And I'm proud to say the Smithsonian is partnering with us now to figure out how to do that. Because they share with the American Museum of the Native Americans, I pronounced that wrong, but they share with us the fact that we don't appreciate the story of our traditional owners and the elders as well as we need to, particularly with everything we're facing now. The dueling grounds are over there. Still totally illegal to duel in Kentucky. We thought Bashir Bevan could work it out that way, but it's still frowned upon. Dueling, totally legal in Indiana though, so come on over. So on our site is where Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay would have dueled. And we have record that Henry Clay dueled there and was shot there. So that happened over there. We know Lewis and Clark left here. And then the big story, that was freedom. The Underground Railroad went across this river. When you sat here, that's freedom. And I can't put myself in that shoe of that slave. But can you imagine the profound feeling to see that shallow water and know that freedom is right there? That's a story we have to bring to life and talk about and own and celebrate, and we can do it on our landscape unique anywhere else, I would argue, up and down the Ohio River. So these are the stories we have to play with there. The other thing we have is we have the sins of mankind. Every sin that we could possibly do through industrialization has been done to this site. It has been timbered, plowed, mined, borrowed, dumped, filled, timbered, poisoned. So it is a bad site, and there's a lot of healing to do. And every time the river floods, I offend people, and I'm going to do it. I know I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Every time it floods, the state of West Virginia ends up on our backs. You know, I think we all know that we get a lot of plastic, and a lot of our sins reveal themselves there. So we have challenges. It's also an environmental justice issue. Anything you didn't want in Louisville, you sent over to this site, because who the hell cares? It's on the other side of the levee. Yeah, that's a City of Louisville logo that we had to pull out of one of the dump sites already there from the trust. You see that lower picture there? That's the dirt from the Yum Center. Remember when that dirt was illegally moved and all those PCBs were dumped? It was dumped illegally over there. This is where you shift off your environmental problems to your poor part of town. Because who's going to, poor people aren't going to bother you. So we've got big environmental justice issues to solve there. The upshot is that we think it's remediable and solvable. The next thing we have is flooding. It's really hard to see, I know there, but those are two shots of the river. One was last February, and the other one is during normal water conditions. So this whole site floods, and it's going to flood more. Spoiler alert, and I can't believe more people aren't talking about this. The projections, which all of our projections have been too conservative, is that the Ohio River in 50 years is going to have 30% more water in it than it does today. Yet, I'm confused about why we build soccer stadiums on the wet side of the levee. That being said, our site is on the wet side of the levee. So, we will be the first post-Sandy, post-Katrina park built in the Midwest. Our park is designed to flood. It's going to be designed to be visited when it floods. And this pushes it into a global platform of interesting parks as a dynamic landscape that's going to be able to shape and respond. Because if we don't, roads are going to, this is a shot we took a couple months ago down in the site. We have entire roads that are collapsing. So it's okay. Climate change is coming. That's fine. I'm past the debate. Just tell me what's going to happen, and then I will hire engineers who are much smarter than architects on this stuff. And they will work on coming up with solutions about how we strategically retreat, adapt, and deal with that change that's coming. It's also the site of Class 4 whitewater. Louisville, Kentucky, and Richmond, Virginia are the only two cities in the United States with Class 4 whitewater. It happens right outside of your window here. So we want to think about ways to activate that, because the U.S. National Kayak Team comes here about twice a year, and they practice. And I bet a bunch of y'all didn't even have the slightest clue that sort of stuff happens here. These rivers here there are about 3 sites in the U.S. that have what are considered Zimbabwe, the African Congo type waves, the Ottawa River up in Canada, and the Ohio and the Columbia are 2 of them. So a really unique asset here to deploy. So now, knowing all that, I've kind of told you what I think is special. I want to take you through some of our design studies of what we think this park is going to look like. We think when we're done, we're going to have a lot of natural areas and a lot of meadows. We think we're going to have a lot of forests that can flood, and we think we have to train our community to see that as a beautiful site. And that's weird for me too, I'll admit it. I've got to train my eye. about appreciating that it's beautiful. But that's our unique landscape here. And whereas with the Parklands was a wonderful experience for me because it is so pastoral. Y'all been out there. The rolling fields, the Kentucky topography, it's a very romantic landscape. And the architects were able to use that. We have to retrain ourselves and say that we're this kind of weird, for the Star Wars geeks in the room, Dagobah sort of just wet, jungly river city. And what does that mean? And what does that space feel like? And I'll tell you, it can feel a little eerie. It can feel a little spooky. And that's okay. We want to create that space because Seattle doesn't have that space, New York doesn't have that space, Chicago doesn't have that space. Only we do. So how do we recreate that drama is one of the things we're challenged with. We are going to have a series of lawns. Now, this is not going to be Waterfront Park. Let me be upfront with that. Waterfront Park is our city's front yard. It does a wonderful job. We are going to be much more rustic and adaptive because we flood and because our landscape is different. So we're going to pick and choose our spots where we do lawns. And if you've been to Prospect Park, we're going to kind of have those lawns with trees that are interspaced, throw out a frisbee, throw out a blanket sort of deal. We want to fit into the ecology of the area. The parkways will be very much like the National Park Service standards that you see go through there. Our trails, that's Governor's Island in New York, are going to be very wide and accommodating. And then we are going to have large sections of elevated trails like this. This is a precedent from over in Holland, where these trails are designed to be usable in floods and they're designed to be usable in low water. Again, picking up that park that you can visit 12 months of the year. So you add all of that together, you get a resilient park, and now I'm not going to let that sit too long. So here, and apologies, when we come out publicly in March, nothing this ugly is going to be presented to you. This is illustrative stuff, but I thought y'all might appreciate seeing some of our thinking. That's the Ohio River there in the foreground. This is how the park is generally laid out. The roads are yellow, the trails are blue and white. This is our park when the water is low. This is our park when the water is high. Notice, you can enjoy every road, every trail, and every experience. And we intentionally are going to take you into these weird spaces that are neither river nor dry land. And this is why we will be the first climate adapted park in the Midwest, and why we are attempting to be a model of how to do this across the nation and be smart about it going forward, while honoring Olmsted, honoring the great circulation, honoring the rooms we want to take you through, and giving you great experiences throughout the park. So that's kind of the highlight overview. Our ongoing task, we're working on land acquisition now. We have almost 50% of the land. We need to build the whole thing, which is better than I thought we'd be after 18 months. We're very keen to keep public expectations in check. I've seen a lot of great projects that come out with balloons and everything's popping, and then there's this giant panic afterwards. Oh my Lord, how are we going to pay for this? This isn't going to happen. And that crushes public trust. And if we know anything about today's political climate, public trust is not something to be trifled with. You get one moment to present a credible argument, so we're going to make sure our I's are crossed and T's dotted, T's crossed. The mongoose to my snake or the snake to my mongoose. Either way, it's not good, and we'll figure it out. The master plan and the engineered is underway. Our campaign strategy for not only construction, but also operations, for making sure we can maintain operational excellence through the design. And then we're going to begin rollout in 2020 with the capital campaign to come. So that's a really high view of what we think, if I'm bold enough to say, I think David Jones and Sam Shine would be happy that it's continuing on in the community that they love so much. And it's probably the best legacy we can pick up and run. I appreciate your patience and letting me talk really fast. Tyler, thank you for the invitation. Luke, thank you for all you do for the community as well. And thank y'all so much for your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions you have and duck and dive.
Hey Scott, Casey Mayer, Waterfront Botanical Gardens, and I share your appreciation for urban green spaces, so congratulations on your work. So obviously this is many, many steps, okay, that you still have to go. What's your biggest struggle now? Like, share with us what you need to, what it is now. Obviously a lot in front of you, but
Yeah.
just tell the community what that.
The boldest struggle, Casey, and I'm glad you asked that, is probably similar to yours. The architects have struggled to find a park in the landscape. And this isn't a dorky way to say it, but how do you find a Cherokee Parkway in a landscape that is landfills and dump sites on a river that floods? And that's been our biggest challenge. I think we're almost there. We're there. And then the next challenge to us will be making the argument to the community, we've done this before, let's do it again. because I don't know what else we can do that will better set up our entire community as a place you'd want to live 100 years from now. And it will never get cheaper than it is today, and it will never get easier than it is to do today. So why not do it today?
Hi, I've got a question about the water level. You said that the Ohio River is going to be 30% more water than it is today, going out to what year? I mean, how? what are we
Yeah, the
looking at?
scale, that projection was by 2071 to 2099, the average stream flow in here will be 30% more than it is today.
Okay, so if this park is going to last 200 or 300 years, I mean, that's a big investment. I mean, and it's hard to project. Are you all pretty confident it won't be 50% more?
That's a great question. We're gonna build a lot above that to be able to accommodate it, because if anything's been true, all of our estimates have been low.
Okay.
So that's a great question. We're taking that into account. You're asking a $1 million question, and I'd be BSing you if I said, yeah, we have it solved. If anything we've proved is, man, every time we engineer and think we have something solved, you know,
Hi, Scott. John Walzak Global. It's a great presentation, and just can't commend you enough for preserving as you develop. And environmental scientists are talking about the value of maintaining natural spaces and growing them to resolve the ills of the planet. Climate change, 1 million species destined for extinction in the next 10 years. And your project is such a phenomenal example of that. I can't tell you how excited I am about that. What are you going to be doing educationally? Letting the park flood is brilliant, and people understanding natural systems. What are you going to do on the educational side of the equation to take that great modeling out into the rest of the community?
yeah, great question, John. I know you were responsible on email. I'm sorry, my fault. I mean, if that was the passive aggressive reminder, that's like level 11 from my mom. That's really well done. To your question, this will be interesting, John. You'll probably be glad to hear us. I know Case will too. We are not going to build an environmental education center. We think there are enough partners that are doing that space already. It behooves us to preserve, protect, and bring a landscape, and then bring it to you to bring the community into interpret and bring people to it. So we want it to be a dynamic element in that way. We haven't gotten into where are your signs going, how do you deploy these lessons yet? Because, quite frankly, technology is moving so quickly right now, we don't know what to do. And then I've got a problem with technology because if you're an upper middle class white kid, you have access to it. I'm not sure when we make decisions on interpretation, we don't take out large sections of our community and start just not doing it thoughtfully. So I want to be very thoughtful about that approach so it hits everyone across the spectrum in our community.
Cynthia Wells Brown, thank you for being
I
here.
don't owe you an email.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Not yet. I'm super excited about this project. I know you talked about the architects and engineers and the idea for site planning. You also mentioned the kayakers and the species. Can you tell us a little bit about the kayakers and the naturalists and the land and the water specialists that you brought on board to start helping with the space?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I can brag on them a little bit. So our whitewater recreation planner is a guy named Scott Shipley. Name will mean nothing to you unless you've been stuck in the room with me. He's the last American medal winner at the Olympics for whitewater sports, and he has designed the last 4 U.S. National Olympic whitewater facilities. He did his recreation plan for us on that on paddling. What we've learned with paddling is really interesting, and what we've learned with the Corps is very interesting. The Corps of Engineers considers the section, I keep looking to it, but look at it on your way out, it's fascinating. The section below the dam here is the most dynamic section on the entire United States river system. It has rises and drops of 30 feet. And that's weird, because when we see the Ohio here from the Louisville perspective, it looks like a lake. I don't know how many of y'all have been down there and seen it when it's like angry, but it's wild. So we've had to think very carefully about that, because you don't want to throw a beginner out there, because no. But if you went out there today, it is eminently paddleable today. And you can go between these fossil beds you can only get access to from paddling. So that's been a big thing for us. A big thing has been challenging the Corps of Engineers. Now, this is a fun discussion. We go to the Corps and you go, hey, I got an idea. And the Corps of Engineers loves ideas, let me tell you. They really respond well to that. So we got the gates. Could we crack a couple and just see what happens in terms of shaking a wave? And if suddenly you would lift one and every Saturday people as far away as Chicago would know we had surf waves, what that could do for inbound business for boaters and paddlers. I mean, we can activate this thing now, kind of easy. So we're starting to put our head under that tent. That's very scary because the Ohio River has been owned by the barge industry. And when you suddenly start saying, no, it has conservation value, it has recreation value, it has cultural value, it's our river, the tent has to get bigger. And that's what we're starting to do. Ecology-wise, and I'll answer quickly, Kristen knows this guy as well as I do. Michael Gage, he was the ecologist for the Parklands of Floydsport, the most thoughtful guy, most sensitive soul I've ever worked with on the land. He walked every acre of our site, inventoried what was there 200 years ago. We had that information that in our hands first, and we gave that to the architects and said, this is the boss. Your park plan must respond to this ecology. So that's absolutely a baseline data for us. So thank you for asking.
Hey Scott, I'm David Dunn. I'm an Olmsted Conservancy Board member, so you're speaking my language, so very excited about the project.
Thank you.
Also a cyclist and a runner, and I've had a couple bike trips over the Big Four Bridge to New Albany, and I've noticed the K&I Bridge over in that direction, and I've learned that it not only does it transport trains, but it used to transport cars. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be a great way to complete the Louisville Loop for cyclists and runners? And there any hope of doing that, or do you know?
Well, I believe there's hope because there's a bridge there with lanes that could be repurposed. And the pathway to get there, I don't know yet. But I do believe there's hope. And I believe it just makes too much sense to not look at that and engage some folks and think about it. The term railroading exists for a reason. So getting the railroad on board may take a little dance. Perhaps this is a good time because at last check, I think the U.S. Secretary of Transportation is from Louisville, Kentucky, and I think the Vice President of the United States is from Indiana. I don't think we'll have another opportunity in my lifetime where those power brokers are in that position to make that case to Norfolk Southern as we are today.
All right, Scott, Kristen Boone. I'm going to serve up
Come on.
for you. If we are sitting in the room and we are thinking, this is amazing, how do I get involved? What are the ways I can help? Whether it's, I heard you say that you all were looking for board members, volunteers, donors, partners, people to open doors, people with other groups for you to speak to. How can this group help?
Oh, Kristen, you're so good. Kristen was my wife, my introduction to Louisville, and I still hold this against her to this day. She got my wife horribly carsick driving her through the Highlands of Cal. Kristen, great question. So here's the deal. This is not the Ask Con. This is an introduction. On that screen was, do I have the power? Oh, let me go to this. That's our website, riverheritageconservancy.org. This is a very simple, soft thing. You can sign up and be aware. If you are interested, and if you have groups that you think we should talk to, we will begin actively engaging the public in March-ish of this coming year. I'm not leaving this room until you all throw me out. Come up to me. I'll give you my card. We want to start putting that list together as we're starting to populate it. You can talk and express excitement about it. But the last thing I want to do is come to you right now, and I don't have a bunch of good answers yet, but I did want to let this group know the pieces are falling in place. The confidence that was brought to the Parklands project is aligning. The resources are going to be in place, and then the ask will come. And, you know, this is just what we do here in Louisville. We just kick ass and take names. And it's time to do it again. So that's the ask. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you very, very much, Scott. What a big presentation. Wonderful job. Wonderful job. Let's give him a round. Okay, we're about ready to adjourn. 2 or 3 reminders. First of all, for our guests today interested in membership, please see Craig Sherman at the Woodlands Rotary table right outside. Also, be on the lookout in your email for your election ballot and the link to go vote for our distinguished leaders. And with that, we are adjourned.